In Lecture 2 here, we'll be looking at the two nations theory, what's called the two nations theory, and the creation of the idea of Pakistan. So as we all know from the reading, British India does divide into two countries, Pakistan and India. As you can see here from this photo, there's actually today three countries. In 1971, what was called East Pakistan declared independence and broke away and created its own country. That's Bangladesh today. The creation of these two countries is based around the idea that they're two different people and that the identity is based on religion. And so this, at first glance, should strike you as pretty weird or pretty unusual, given that this is such a diverse part of the world. 450 languages spoken about, so many different religious groups. Why, of all of these different markers of identity, why is it religion rather than language or ethnicity that is so intractable that you need to have your own country? And this also raises some interesting philosophical questions about what part of one's identity is most important. We can think of these issues today playing out in our country, whether it's issues of race, class, gender, religion, and so forth. So the two nations theory, as it's called in India, is this ideology, that is to say, this belief system, that the primary identity and unifying denominator of people in the Indian subcontinent is their religion. That's the most important part of their identity. That's what this theory is. So where did it come from and how is it substantiated? I guess I should just back up 1 second. Let's go back to this map. There are Muslims all over South Asia. So to what extent does a Bengali Muslim from way over here have something in common with a Bengali Hindu? Well, they eat the similar foods, they speak the same language, they have cultural traditions that are regional, but they are different religiously. But what about that same Bengali Muslim? How much does he have in common with a Sindhi or a Hyderabadi or a Gujarati Muslim? They eat differently, dress differently, speak different languages, but is their religious shared identity more dominant? We can think about this going the other way with Hindus. Does a low caste Hindu from the southern state of Orissa share their identity with a high caste Hindu from Punjab over here, or Assam over here? What makes a person a person? These are the sorts of questions here. And what connects people over distance? So this idea that there are two different kinds of people in South Asia doesn't come out of nowhere, but is built over time. And we can look at some events in history. The Morley-Minto Reforms of 1919, also known as the Indian Councils Acts of 1909, is this act of Parliament of the United Kingdom that brought about limited increase in the involvement of Indians in the governance of British India. So this led to more Indians being able to be involved, vote. It really only brings it up to 1% of Indians. But the key piece here is we have separate electorates for Muslims. That is to say, some of the seats are held for only Muslims. Only Muslims can have X number of spots. This was put forward as a divide and conquer strategy to divide up unified Indian opposition to British rule. But when you see it in the law, Indians are receiving this message, oh, well, there's two types of Indians. There's Muslims and then there's the rest of us. and that includes Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and Christians and so forth. So if the law says there's Muslims and everyone else, it begins to inculcate a thought that there's Muslims and everyone else. And that's 1909. As we go forward, we see a number of different political parties that are based around religion. And these are religious political parties. Now, these religious political parties are actually promoted by the British authorities. They like the idea of having a Hindu political party or a Muslim political party or a regional Hindu political party because the authorities see it as a way of weakening the freedom movement. And one piece of evidence of that is British motivations for the partition of Bengal in 1905, that Bengal is divided up ostensibly to help with the bureaucratic running of Bengal, but the real reason that Bengal was divided up was to cut up Bengal, cut up the opposition. British Prime Minister at the time, Ramsay MacDonald, grants separate electorates in India for different segments of the Indian population, by caste, by religion. Anglo-Indians are people, what we would use the term biracial, people of Indian and British ancestry, Europeans, untouchables. All of these different groups have their own congressman, their own politician. Congressman's not the right word. So we can imagine the equivalent in the United States is, instead of having 2 senators per state, we have a male senator and a female senator for every state, or a white senator and a non-white senator from every state. Okay, it's like that, built into the legislative structure. So this guy here in a suit, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali Gujar, creates this name Pakistan in 1933. I think that's interesting because Pakistan is a country 15 years later, but just becomes an idea in 33. He lives his life in England. His proposal is ignored. It's problematic. I mean, it doesn't make, at first blush, much sense. To say Muslims are their own country betrays the fact that Muslims are not penned in. They're across the subcontinent, in significant minorities throughout the northern part of the country, and then in the central area where Hyderabad is around here, where they're the majority. But look at there's majority here, majority there, and majority here. And then significant minority, like a 30%, 40% here. So what kind of country is that? That's like an archipelago of country. There's also not a Muslim language. These are people who are Muslim who speak lots and lots and lots of different languages. So what ends up happening is Pakistan isn't a serious idea. It's more of a cipher, a secret code. Pakistan is a cipher, meaning it could mean whatever you want it to mean. If you were a politician and you say, we want Pakistan, well, what does that mean? It doesn't, it's vague. It means whatever you want it to mean. We have this in our country. In the 2016 election, then candidate Trump was calling for this phrase, make America great again. Well, what does that mean? Well, does that mean we're going to go back in time? Does that mean that we're going to change some economic policies? Does that mean we're going to change some racial policies? Does that mean we're going to be a leader militarily around the world? Make America great again is vague, and that's where a lot of the power comes from. And what we have here with Pakistan is similar vagueness. It's, what does that mean? An actual country, a separate country? Does it mean just more power? Does that mean greater representation, Muslim pride? It means whatever you want it to mean. And in fact, it doesn't seem likely. If you were a betting person 10 years before Indian independence, here in 1937, would you bet that the Muslim League in Pakistan would be victorious? You would say, heck no. So what happened in the 1937 election? 1937 election, it was a big provincial parliamentary election that was guaranteed by the Government of India Act of 1935. Very, very briefly, the Government of India Act of 1935 increases the number of people who can vote. Now, like 1 in 6 Indians can vote. And you can compare that to under the Morley-Minto reforms, it's 1% of Indians can vote. And now we have 1/6 of Indians can vote. So more and more Indians can vote, and the Muslim League doesn't do that well. They don't win too much. In Muslim majority areas, the Muslim voters back regional candidates rather than the National Muslim League Party. So they back like the local regional candidate. So for us, it was like we wouldn't back the Democrats or Republicans, we would back the Oregon First Party or the Pioneer Party or some made up like local party, right? So that's the same thing that's happening here. The National Party isn't winning. Muslim League doesn't look so hot. Jinnah doesn't have a lot of power. And what's interesting for us is Congress looks at this, right? Congress is winning all this teal colored. And you notice the Muslim League didn't win a single province. The majority of isn't the majority party in any province. So Congress looks at this map after the 37 election. They say, Jinnah's pretty weak. Muslim League's pretty weak. We don't need to give them what they want. They're asking for separate electorates, and they're asking for Pakistan, and they're asking for us to give, and weaken the central authority. We're not going to do that. What's very important to Nehru is that when India is free, it has a strong central government that can industrialize the country, that can create a planned economy, that can take care of issues of education, of women's rights, and can deal with that. He wants a strong central government, what we would call in this country a Hamiltonian as opposed to a Jeffersonian country. And so Nehru doesn't want to give power to Jinnah. And he looks at this map and he goes, oh, I don't need to give any power to Jinnah. He can go, sod off. I don't need to give him anything. Unfortunately, what this leads to is the Muslim League saying, well, we're just going to ask for more and more. The argument probably is more like it's bargaining, right? They want a little something, so they ask for a lot and hope that they get the little. But this is relevant because it's a clear indicator that the Muslim League does not have a strong position in 1937. This is important because it is a sign to Congress that the Muslim League is weak, and this is the beginning of the Muslim League's push for their own country, because they look at this map and they say, oh, we're going to be under Hindu domination forever. They look at this map and they think, we are going to be dominated by the Hindus unless we have our own country, so we need to have our own country. This historian, Aisha Jalal, she's really fantastic. I quite like her scholarship. She puts forward the thesis that Jinnah himself, the Qaid-e-Azam, the father of the country, he didn't even want Pakistan. She puts forward the thesis that basically he was just making this extreme claim for Pakistan with the hopes that the British would give him more concessions, or that Nehru would power share at the center. And he didn't actually want a separate country. So we can look now at some, well, I'll back up here real quick. How can you argue that Jinnah didn't want Pakistan? Well, Jinnah was known for most of his career. His goal was a united India. For almost all of his career, he pushed for a united India. In fact, his nickname, if you will, was the father of Hindu-Muslim unity. He wasn't even interested in separate electorates back in 1909 under the Morley-Minto reforms. He grows over the decades with a desire for power. He wants to be seen as a sole spokesman for Muslims. He wants to be at the center, at the national level. He doesn't want to be a provincial leader. He doesn't want to be a leader of this province or that province. He wants to be here in Delhi. He wants to be at the capital city. He wants to be sharing power with Nehru for the whole country, protecting the Muslims here, everywhere, not just one country or the other. And so there's reasons to think from Jinnah's own records and his own speeches that he, in fact, doesn't want a separate country. He wants the ability to run all Indias or represent all Indias, all Muslim Indians everywhere. So, okay, let's just look at Pakistan as a political entity. What are the challenges to its existence? Well, as the reading is established, and if you watch the documentary Partition, The Day India Burned, there are some real challenges to the existence of Pakistan. So, if we go back to this previous slide here, Punjab is this region that has a lot of Muslims, but also has a lot of Sikhs. And this area, Bengal here, is Hindu and Muslim. So these are not Muslim-only regions. These are both bi-religious, dual religious. There's two religions, two dominant religions in each. Here in Bengal, it's Hindus and Muslims. Here it's Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims. And so you would think, therefore, that you would either need to divide the region or make people move. Without a unified Punjab and Bengal, Pakistan would be a shell, because Bengal and Punjab are very, very wealthy states. So you say, okay, well, the country of Pakistan won't exist unless we give them the whole province, because otherwise they're just going to be poor. Okay, well, what you're going to do at that point is you're going to force Muslims, or pardon me, you're going to force Sikhs to live in Pakistan, or you're going to force Hindus to live in Pakistan. So you need a unified Pakistan. Pakistan needs a unified Bengal and Punjab, but those states are mixed. So how do you square that? Calcutta, which is here, Calcutta is here. It accounts for, it's a wealthy, wealthy, wealthy city. Where does Calcutta go? It's Hindu majority. But if you don't give Calcutta to East Pakistan is just, it's poor. It's super poor. There's no industry there. There's no major seats of education and trade. It's all the interior. You need Calcutta to make this work. But Calcutta is Hindu. So if you just say, well, the Muslim part is going to be the Muslim part, it's going to be really, really poor and unstable. So one of the British worries was, remember, they're thinking about World War III. One of the British worries is that if you have Pakistan without these wealthier parts, if these wealthier parts go to India, could Pakistan defend itself from the Soviet Union? Here's a good map for seeing how challenging, illogical maybe, Pakistan as a separate country is. While the overwhelming majority of this region and this region are Muslim, you have a significant minority throughout the subcontinent. And if your argument is Muslims can't be in India because they will be oppressed, does the creation of Pakistan just give up on these people and say, yeah, they're doomed because they're going to be dominated by Hindus? Or is it acknowledging that they're going to have to move to the other two new countries? Or is it saying that, in fact, they'll be fine in a multi-religious democracy? So Pakistan, the creation of a two-state theory comes with a lot of economic, infrastructure, humanitarian problems.